Welcome back to What's Left podcast. If you're new here, my name is Ashley. I am the host where we talk about all things women and femme, whether that be relationships, career, beauty and aesthetics, content creation, pop culture, politics. We are here to discuss it all. Today, I really want to talk about where beauty and health intersect. I have a lot of opinions about the beauty industry. I invest in my own personal life, and some people find that very controversial, especially in the world of feminism, which I am well aware of. So I wanted to talk more in depth about my perspectives because I think that that is a little bit of a question in some people's minds where you think that you have to be one way or the other. You have to be either invested or not invested. And to me, I think that there is a happy medium, especially when it comes to your health, because beauty and health are not completely separate. It's not a zero sum game with those two. I recently posted a video on my TikTok account talking about laser hair removal, and a lot of people seem to agree that laser hair removal didn't necessarily work for them. I think that there was a craze, especially on Groupon in like 2015 to 2018, or at least that's when I invested into it. And at first, it was sold to me that it was a permanent hair removal treatment, that you had to go back for at least 8 sessions, and then you would be done and you wouldn't be growing hair in the area that you were treating. That wasn't true for me. So I not only spent so much time, went through so much pain, and also spent so much money for something that I now believe was a scam. I now have since invested into electrolysis, which is a permanent hair removal. I'm still going through the process, so I am yet to see that it is actually permanent, but so far the results are so much different. There was a comment on that video that was talking about how can you be feminist and forward thinking while also still investing into these like very patriarchal structured beauty standards. And so I come from the perspective of me personally, I was getting the area treated where I got ingrown hairs. That is why I got laser hair removal in the first place, because it was painful, because it was not comfortable to exist within. And then I use an example like my sibling who gets electrolysis and also did laser on their neck because they get ingrown hairs. So I think that in people's minds, everything being so black and white, it's really not as straightforward as that. As much as my brain would like for it to be that way, when it comes to beauty, when it comes to aesthetics, it's not always one or the other. Another really good example of this for me is my jaw surgery. So I have been very open and honest about my what I'm doing, why I have braces, what that process is going to look like for me, and my intentions behind the aesthetics from the beginning. So I have been someone who has always had a very small mouth, and before this, I have been a participant in Botox and fillers and obviously laser hair removal. I dye my hair, I do my nails. I participate in beauty, maybe not to a degree in which other people participate, but I'm definitely not free from participation. I shave my legs. I do groom myself in a way that some people would perceive as being within patriarchal standards. So, my perspective is that you can have both. And I do think that you need to be very mindful when you are investing into these treatments. So, when it comes to my jaw surgery, I've always had a very small mouth. I had braces when I was a teenager, and it just really didn't get me to the place that I wanted to be, both physically and aesthetically. I think with the internet, we have access to so much more information now where you can find something and realize that you didn't even have the answer to a problem until you saw it on a video before it resonated with you and you had the exposure of someone else's experience. So for me personally, I have always been not a great sleeper. I have always had a really small airway. When I went to go see my orthodontist, I thought that I was just going to get my teeth straightened, and I had told her I'm not really super happy with my side profile. I think that I'm just not very I'm very asymmetric. I'm not very symmetric, and I think that that looks like a bone deficiency. Like my bones did not grow the way that they were supposed to when I was a child. They tried to use orthodontic treatments and appliances, but it just didn't work. And I had mentioned to her, "Oh, I've seen people do a chin implant." And she said, "Ashley, based on your case, I think that the reason that your side profile isn't as structured as you're describing is because your bones quite literally didn't grow in that way." And so she did scans. We came to find out that I had a narrow airway scientifically. Then I did a sleep study and I found out that I have pretty significant sleep apnea for somebody my age. And so, with all of those things considered, she said, instead of going through a superficial route and only worrying about aesthetics, let's conquer the entire issue. Let's do this the right way so that over the course of your life, you're more healthy, you have more longevity, you get the kind of look and feel and aesthetic that you want. And so you're checking off all of these boxes. So, what we came to the conclusion of with my case specifically is that I could have the side profile I wanted, and I could also sleep better, have less sleep apnea, really be preventative when it came to the issue that I was dealing with. So, with that being said, I openly talked about the aesthetics part of this surgery. I'm getting double jaw surgery. They're bringing both of my jaws forward, and that's going to be pretty significant recovery. This is not going to be an easy undertaking. And publicly, I communicated that I'm really looking forward to the aesthetics part of it. You're changing your face when it comes to a surgery like this. And of course, I want to be mindful of what I am going to look like after. I would feel foolish not to keep that in a significant regard when going through the steps and planning the surgery. The surgeon that I'm going to is a specialist when it comes to jaw surgery. And you sit down and you get very meticulous on the measurements, what your outcomes are, you're projecting what your soft tissue is going to look like. Like, it is very detail oriented. And I think oftentimes that is my issue with the beauty industry, is that it's a lot of quick fixes. I think I keep calling my experience in delayed gratification. So the opposite of instant gratification, because I think that the beauty industry specifically is very much instant gratification. Put filler in your under eyes, put filler in your lips, do all of these things, get these threads, X, Y, and Z. And now it's coming out that those things don't necessarily last. Maybe they look really good at first, but then they don't look as great after a while, or they tell you that filler isn't permanent and it's going to dissolve, but we're now finding out that that's not necessarily true, because you could do a scan of your face and your filler has migrated and it is now in different parts of your face that you didn't see before. And I always giggle because every time I go to the aesthetics clinic where I've gotten all of my filler dissolved, or at least most of it from what they were able to get from an ultrasound, I had filler in my under eyes, I had filler in my lips, and I had a little tiny bit of filler in my chin. And before I go through this surgery, I wanted all of my filler gone, I wanted a blank canvas, and I wanted to start fresh. And so we would giggle that when I go in, there's now things like PRP, there's Easy Gel, there's all of these other options that I think can be really overwhelming to people. But when you look at it also from a health perspective, is why are you doing it? What are you trying to get out of it? What are the potential complications? And I just wish there was more of a transparent conversation about it, because when I first got filler, of course, I just wanted to fix my under eyes, but there was never posing of a question of, why do I need to get filler under my under eyes anyways? Oftentimes, what a doctor or at the med spa they would say is like, oh, it's simply just your bone structure. So now backing up, thinking, oh my gosh, this is probably because my upper and lower jaw did not develop the way that it was supposed to, which is leaving all of these other issues within the symmetry of my face and the aesthetics of my face. So I just think that the beauty industry and technology is advancing so quickly that maybe back in 2015, 2016, 2017, they didn't have PRP. That wasn't even really an option, or Easy Gel wasn't really an option. And so they were just pumping people up with filler. And now people are trying to reel it back in. We can talk about the conservatism of aesthetics in general, but now people are having more options that are aligned with health and longevity. For me, I always want to keep that balance. I don't ever want to outweigh beauty over health in the grand scheme of things. And I saw a comment on that video that I had made about the laser hair removal and the electrolysis, and they were saying it's the same reason why you want to stay physically fit and healthy, and that also translates to aesthetics. Your body looks more physically fit and healthy. Your hair is healthier, your nails are healthier, your skin when you're hydrated. All of these things correlate. I'm not saying that there's one specific look to healthy, but I think that when you're investing into your health with the intention of both beauty and aesthetics, you're going to have a greater outcome than you would if you were outweighing one or the other. And so the perspective that these are patriarchal beauty standards is, yes, I don't think that we're ever going to be able to completely uproot ourselves from these expectations, from what media is selling us, what books are writing, the genderification of razors. We can even use that as a perfect example of men's razors and women's razors are sold on different parts of the shelf. They're branded in very different ways and they're priced at different price points. They do the same exact thing. It is a piece of plastic or metal in the case of being sustainable, and a razor at the end of it. The idea that there is gender when it comes to grooming is so beyond me. And it always makes me giggle because Eric comes from the perspective of they're just not a fan of body hair in general. They're like, I don't think that body hair looks that great on anyone. That's just their personal preference. And so we can get so stuck in, oh, women are supposed to fit in this box. Women are supposed to do this. And yes, of course, it is an act of rebellion to not do the things that society is telling you to do. It is an act of revolution to stand up and decide for yourself. And the way that I see it is that as long as you are making intentional and conscious choices about what you are doing with your body, that should be yours and up to you. Oftentimes, straight people specifically do not see body modification as being gender confirmation or gender affirming care. When a woman goes and gets boobs, that's gender affirming care. Is that within the male gaze? Probably. But I'm not to say I'm the first person that says I want to get my boobs reduced. That's for me. That would be gender affirming care because that makes me feel more comfortable within my body. There's also a facet of this conversation that I find really interesting when it comes to queerness, or even if it just comes to beauty standards as a whole. Queer people are more likely to rebel against traditional beauty standards because they don't want to fit into that mold. They just don't by naturally they don't fit into being straight. Some people can't hide their queerness. And so tattoos, piercings, those sorts of body modifications go against traditional beauty standards. And I think for me, the way that I see an individual fitting in this perspective is, what do you feel most comfortable in? I always think about when I was a child, and we can use Eric as an example because Eric has never been able to hide their queerness. I was able to hide my queerness more so, but I was deemed as a tomboy because I didn't do what girls wanted to do. I felt most natural in baggy t-shirts and clothes from the boys section, and all of that is your individual expression. It's so funny to me too when people think that beauty and things like that are really radical. And I always go back to, well, you cut your hair, you cut your nails, you take care of your skin and your face, you wear sunscreen when you go into the sun. And all of those have a purpose. Sunscreen, for example, has a purpose of protecting your skin from the sun. And it also can keep your skin looking healthier longer. You cut your hair because it might be dying on the ends and you want your hair to look healthier. So I think that this idea that everything with beauty is a spectrum, everything with health is a spectrum, and you have to decide for yourself what you find most comfortable in your skin physically, and also what aesthetically you find appealing. Because what I find appealing is not what the next person is going to find appealing. I am someone who always gets the comments, oh, you have prison tattoos. Those are the ugliest things I've ever seen. To me, I like the way that they look. And so, really sitting down with yourself, doing the soul searching to realize, what is it that I like? My hair is not natural. I dye my hair this way. I cut my hair short because that's what I find most attractive. And I think that oftentimes people with social media, it is very predatory. I cannot disagree with that. I do believe that consumerism is extremely predatory. Capitalism forces you to feel as though you're missing out. So you buy more things to feel more important. You're told you should look a certain way. And so you really have to resist all of the outside noise in order to determine for yourself. And that takes a really long time. We could even get into the conversation about personal style because I think personal style is also at the intersection of beauty and health. And it really takes time to craft who you want to be, who you even are. I think throughout my 20s, it was a constant rediscovering of myself. You're, of course, getting closer over time with more life experience, but you have no idea really who you are without exposure to certain things. So if I had never left the town that I grew up in and I had never traveled the world, I would have never found certain parts of myself that I found really interesting. The beauty standards in my town are going to be very different from the beauty standards across the globe. So I think more exposure allows you to have more options, and that's even more true when it comes to health. We live in the United States of America where our healthcare is shit. Our insurance doesn't cover anything. And then you go outside of this country and you realize, oh my gosh, the access that people have to invest into their health is so much more significant. When I was just graduated college, I had gone out to go traveling with my friends. It was New Year's. We were in Paris. We were about to have the greatest time ever. And I needed to have emergency surgery. Unforeseen to anyone. We could have never predicted this. And of course, I had to go to the hospital. I didn't really speak French and they were trying to speak English. It was a really disjointed conversation, but I still had the most spectacular care. Was it really expensive because I wasn't a citizen of France? Yes. But if I had been a citizen of France, that surgery would have been no issue because it would have been paid for. Citizens of that country are given really good quality healthcare. I think about it also when Eric and I were in Mexico. Eric was having major stomach issues and we went to the hospital. And oftentimes people get so worried about care outside of the United States because we've been told that care is worse outside of the United States, that we're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. Eric had spectacular care. It really wasn't that expensive to stay overnight. It wasn't really that expensive to get the tests done that they needed to get done. And it just blows my mind. There was another time when I was in Mexico. I try my best to go outside of America to get a lot of my aesthetics treatments. Fortunately, I have found a specialist when it comes to my jaw surgery. And so I am seeing someone in California, but every other time when it came to getting filler, when it came to getting Botox, I even have these like cysts on my head. They're not cancerous or anything, but one of them was getting irritated one time and I needed to go to the dermatologist and they needed to cut it out. And you go to this dermatologist and they'll do a full body scan, they'll screen you for any skin cancer and they'll remove it that day. They'll do the freezing it off, they'll do the lasers, they'll do anything that you need. I've gone to the dentist in other countries. So I think that this idea that we need to stay within our bubble and that our options are so limited when it comes to health and beauty is really to the profit making and the success of the companies and the industries within the United States because they want you to feel cut off from the rest of the world. They don't want you to know what is available to you. They don't want you to know that health and beauty do intersect, that you can be mindful of both without having to break the bank. And so this is why we see people go to Turkey all the time and get their teeth done or get hair transplants or what have you. And I'm not saying all of those choices are the right choices. If you make an informed, intentional decision for yourself, I don't think that it is anybody else's business to tell you what you can and cannot do with your body. If I believe in my body, my choice, then I need to be able to extend that to aesthetics, to beauty, to health. That is not my place to tell anybody what they can and cannot do. And of course, the line and the nuance is being educated, remaining mindful of your choices. Can I look back on when I was 18, 19, 20 years old and say, oh my gosh, I was totally a victim of marketing, of coercion, of psychological manipulation, of the pressure of social media? 100%. Now that I'm a decade past that, I'm 30, I have more awareness of what I want to do with my body. And so I think that as we age, we also need to continue to have these really vulnerable and open conversations about beauty. And I think that it's incredible that people get online and they talk about what they're getting done. Do we have to understand that there are young people and young girls and young femmes on the internet that are being exposed to these things? Yes, I think that social media has completely distorted and changed people's perceptions of what normal people look like. And Eric and I talk about this all the time where I'm sure you've seen those TikToks where it's like, I forget what normal bodies look like. I forget what normal people look like outside of influencers and content creators. You go out in public and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't see people that look the way that people do online. And we have to remember that our algorithms are centered around showing us very small amounts of people, and the average person doesn't look like the average person that you see online. I think TikTok has broken down that barrier a little bit more because if you set yourself up, your algorithm will show you diversity, and that is incredible because before that wasn't really the case. There was one way that beauty was supposed to look. We can even think about the Victoria's Secret fashion show. And I even was saying this to Eric about the Schiaparelli show where all of the models were so thin. That is not diversity to me. That is not seeing an array and getting the exposure that we all need to go, oh, I think that's beautiful. If we're only shown skinny, people in their minds are going to go, oh, well, skinny is the only thing that's beautiful. And that's why I think that diversity is so important because someone else can see their body and go, oh my gosh, that person is absolutely incredible. So therefore, I am incredible. I have the potential to be incredible. And so I think that as we open up, there are obviously people that are still trying to fit one way, one beauty standard. And the Schiaparelli show was low key that for me, where I was like, oh my gosh, there's all of the models are thin. And that's so boring. It's so boring not to see diversity. I was having a shower thought the other day too, where I was like, how boring and insecure do you have to be if all you do is surround yourself with people who are like you? Like, I couldn't think of anything more boring. Of course, we like to be mirrored. We like to have people agree with us, but like not all the time. All the time leaves you to be in a lack of exposure. This is why I love traveling. I love going other places. I love talking to other people because you don't know what you don't know. And I think as Americans, I just recently saw this video of this like white woman who was crying and she's like, oh my gosh, with all the people that are getting deported, like, can we go back to having one language be the standard? And this other woman got on and I think she lived in Florida, and she was saying, it is not my fault that you don't know two languages and therefore are not competitive within the market. And I couldn't agree with that more. Americans' brains are so rotted to believe that life is one way. This is all very intentional, obviously, because people profit off of a lack of education and a limiting mindset. But the idea that life is so small and so restricted. I can't think of something more boring. I can't think of being constantly just regurgitated back what you already believe. That means you're never challenged. That means you're never curious. That means you're never interested in exploring life beyond yourself. And that's why for me, beauty is such an expression of self. It's the RuPaul quote, everything, we're born naked and the rest is drag. That is exactly how I feel. Like we are all caricatures and archetypes and avatars that we are going to dress up. Eric and I giggle about this all the time. If you were the same avatar you were when you were in high school, when you didn't know yourself, I now think you still don't know yourself. I look back at photos of me when I was in high school and I'm almost unrecognizable. I'm almost unrecognizable a year ago. Obviously, my tattoos are going to remain, but I've changed my hair color. I cut my hair. I try new clothes. I get more tattoos. I try new rings. I like to experiment and explore. And I think that you have to be somebody willing to be seen. And oftentimes, people who are unwilling to explore their avatar are nervous about the judgment of others. And that's why, with the rise of social media, trends, people just go with the flow too often. And I think, of course, in the beauty industry, people just go with what they think is cool at the time. It makes me think about the Kardashians, where they were getting the BBLs and now they have since got their BBLs removed. But they set the trend, and then all these other people follow suit and get BBLs. And then the Kardashians, who have the capital and the resources, the accessibility to get their BBLs removed, are now just going in a different direction of beauty standard because they were never actually invested into that look. And I'm not saying that you can't change yourself. You totally can. But I think younger people or people without as many resources are more impressionable because they can't make the change in the same way that somebody like the Kardashians could make the change, or somebody who is of celebrity status and has access to the best doctors or has the capital to be able to make those changes. So, my perspective, I don't ever want to be able to get on the internet or get on a platform and say, you should be doing this. You should be getting this X, Y, and treatment. No, these are the treatments that I get. I'm not going to lie to you, but I'm also going to be really honest about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, what my intention is, what I'm thinking I'm going to get out of it. And not that I owe that to anybody, but I do think that it's really important because for me, I didn't know that my lack of bone structure was leading to my sleeping problems. I didn't know that I could be potentially getting anxiety or having breathing issues because of my bone structure. And with exposure, seeing other people talk about it or see other people's recovery and healing, that made me feel more empowered to make a choice for myself. I believe to my core that we know our body best, and not in the way of don't trust doctors, but just be really invested into your own beauty, into your own health, be asking the right questions. I remember before I found the doctor that I'm going to in California, the specialist, I went to go see a plastic surgeon, and he quoted me like 1/3 of the price. He was going to do the surgery. He was going to do fat grafting. Like he was going to do crazy things. And at first I was like, wow, for that price, that sounds really incredible. I have since gone to a specialist and want to make sure that the structure is what I want, and I can always do the extras after. But when I was in that consultation with him, I was asking him all of these questions. I said, is my nose going to cave in if you bring my upper jaw out too much? Okay, how does the fat grafting work? Okay, is that going to change or my nostrils going to flare? Is how long is the healing going to take? Just all of the questions under the sun. And he goes, "Oh my gosh, you're asking such incredible questions. Usually people don't really ask me these questions because in I think some people's minds they think, "Oh, the doctor is the expert, therefore like I don't really know." But for me, the way that my mind works, I need to know what they're doing in order for me to feel comfortable with it. That's with aesthetics and that is with health. This is also something that has been so prevalent in my life over the last couple of years, which is birth control. Because again, you know your body best. You know when birth control is making you feel different, act different, be different. And for me, I wanted to get my IUD removed because I was like, I don't know my body outside of artificial hormones. I want to know what it's like. And of course, there's all this buzz around, is birth control good for you? Is this something that you should be taking on a daily basis? Does it change your personality? Does it change your sexuality? Some women say, when I got my birth control taken out, I was attracted to women. I was no longer attracted to men. And so there's all of these questions swirling. And I think that when you meet with your doctor, it is so important to ask those types of questions. For me and my lived experience is that oftentimes they can't answer every single question because they don't live in your body. They don't know your body. You have to be guided by your intuition to a certain extent, on top of the credibility and accessibility, the education of the experts that you are going to. So I would never, this is me personally, I would never put all of my trust, all of my faith into somebody else, because at the end of the day, I have to live in my body. I have to live with the choices that I'm making in collaboration with a doctor. So, for example, me going in and changing the structure of my face, my airway is going to become bigger. I'm going to go through soft tissue changes. I'm going to have to learn how to hold my mouth differently. My mouth and things are going to move differently. And my doctor can feel super confident in the case that he's working on, which is mine. But he doesn't have to live in that body once those results come into fruition. And so going into it, I need to be the most well versed in order to feel comfortable and confident and live with the potential risks that might come with it, because there are risks. There's risks to everything. There are risks if you don't engage in investing into your health. There are risks that if you do engage investing into your health, because I don't think that there is ever a one and done answer. We are constantly evolving, we are constantly changing, our bodies are constantly aging. And so, what are you doing to protect yourself throughout that? And I don't think that it's a bad thing to be worried about your beauty along the way. I've seen so many women, which I think is absolutely incredible, growing out their gray hair. I always thought that gray hair was super hot, so I don't even understand why that's a beauty standard in the first place. Is it's very vulnerable, I think, for women to, again, have an active revolution or rebellion against beauty standards and say, hey, you told me that I can't grow my hair out, so therefore I am going to grow my hair out. In the same way that, oh, we're told that longer hair is more beautiful or thinner is beautiful. And people who actively reject that, I have so much admiration for, because I see myself in that category too. People say tattoos are ugly, and I go, okay, well, screw you. I love tattoos. I'm going to invest in that. And that's a beauty standard in and of itself. So, getting really clear and confident on where you fit and making the choices for yourself. I know oftentimes in the feminist space, people will say, like, you're not enough of a feminist if you're not being radical and you're still wearing makeup and you're still investing, you're still dyeing your hair, you're doing all these things. And at the end of the day, there are baseline hygiene practices that I think that everyone should be investing in, whether you're gendered or not, where you're going to cut your nails, you're going to cut your hair, you're going to do X, Y, and Z, but you're also allowed to dress yourself up in ways that make you feel the most confident. Just make sure that you are choosing that to the best of your ability. Do I think that we're ever going to be able to completely uproot and make very isolated decisions within a vacuum? No. Of course, there are always, always, always going to be outside voices and outside noise. But if you're able to have the confidence within yourself, really sit with yourself, it's like online shopping. It's when you think you want something because you've been sold and marketed to. Say you see someone on TikTok and you're like, oh my gosh, their outfit is so cute, or I really like that bag. You go, you see if you can find the bag. Okay, let's sit on this. Let's sit on this. Let's think about this. Let's really dwell on this. Let's meditate on this. And then you can really come to the conclusion, okay, after 3 weeks, you go, wow, I still really want that bag. You can test yourself even more. 3 weeks later, do I still want the bag? Sometimes the feeling fades because marketing does its job of wanting you to have that feeling and get that instant gratification right away. That's why for me, with my jaw, essentially, is that I have had a year at least to think about this. I've had my braces for a year and a month at this point. And I have had a year to sit and ponder, is this something that I really want to do? If I want it a year later, I definitely want it. So the same thing when it comes to beauty and aesthetics. Okay, you want your under eyes done. Why do you want your under eyes done? What is that going to get you? What feeling is that going to make you feel? If you don't get your under eyes done, what is that feeling going to leave you feeling like? Do you already feel like you are enough if you don't get your under eyes done? It's constantly questioning your own intentions. And I think that there comes a level of self-awareness where you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and be honest. Why do I want this? What am I doing? Am I doing this for myself? Am I doing this for other people? Do I think I'm going to be loved more if I get this? And I think that if you can spend the time and exert the energy to be honest about why you're doing certain things, and oh, okay, does this thing lead to this thing that invests deeper into my health? You just constantly have that thread follow through in order to make the best informed decision. And research takes time. I think that that's something that, looking back on, if we talk about the laser hair removal, I didn't take the time to really research, read studies, talk to experts, go to somebody outside of the person that was offering me the deal, of understanding what this is going to do to me, what this investment, if this investment is going to be worth it. Again, I think oftentimes we want really instant gratification. And I will say it did. It worked for doing my ingrown hairs, but was I lied to that it was permanent? 100%. So research takes time. Spending the time to really understand will really pay off in the long run, because I would rather regret taking the time and being without for a while than regret doing something that I didn't fully research. And I think that this is what my jaw surgery is really teaching me, is that things take time. Patience is required. Things don't happen overnight. I know that we want things to happen overnight, but something that is worth it will take time. Are there instances that good things can be done right and quickly? Absolutely. But being prepared for things to take a while will be worth it in the end, or at least that's what I tell myself specifically to this surgery. I will say that after my surgery is done, I have to let everything settle, and I'm going to make decisions on top of that on whether or not I want to invest more into beauty, which I think I will. I participate in microneedling, I participate in lasers. I really want to make sure that I'm taking care of my skin. I grew up doing swim team, doing water polo, doing diving, and I didn't wear sunscreen like the way that I was supposed to. My parents didn't really encourage me to be diligent about sunscreen and be diligent about a skincare routine. And thankfully, I look at my mother and she's getting closer to 70, and her skin looks absolutely incredible for not taking care of her skin for the most of her life. And so, thinking and learning the lessons of the people that came before us is okay, if I don't take care of my skin, it'll look like X. But if I do take care of my skin, maybe I will be able to prevent skin cancer. I will be able to prevent wrinkles. Not that wrinkles are bad. I think that wrinkles are fine, but it's just being informed on if I do this, what is the outcome? If I don't do this, what is the outcome? And how do all of these things affect each other will do you well, I think, in the long run. So if you're someone who is invested into beauty, I don't think that you're wrong. If you're someone who isn't invested into beauty because you're doing it out of an act of rebellion, I don't think you're wrong. I don't think that there is really a wrong answer in this, especially when it comes to gender affirming care, because I support gender affirming care. I think that all people should be able to have access to the resources that make them feel the most comfortable in their bodies. Do you want to spend your life constantly thinking about the meat sack that you live in? No. I don't think so. So, if doing something makes you walk more confidently in the world, allows the mental space to be unloaded for you to be thinking about other things other than your body, I absolutely think that you can and should invest into that if you think that's going to help you. If you're just doing it because you're trying to put a band-aid on a bucket that's pouring out and gushing out, obviously you have more inner work that you need to do. But if these things are accessible to you, absolutely. I think about people who got a tattoo once and are now getting their tattoos removed. Should they be able to have access to the resources to get their tattoos removed? Absolutely. Did they make a choice that maybe they regret? Sure. But should they be able to undo that choice? Yeah, sometimes with body work, it is quite permanent. Tattoos are sold to us as permanent because they are, and it takes a lot of work to get them removed. But something like getting your nose done or even my jaw, these are very permanent, riskful decisions. And so just being mindful along the way. So I hope that that kind of cleared up a little bit of what the controversy is around my perspectives of health and beauty. I don't think that they're completely isolated. I think that they come at a crossroads more often than people would like to believe. And of course, there are very silly beauty standards that people are allowed to participate in. Do I think that women should always be the victims of these marketing schemes of these industries? Absolutely not. But men do this all the time. Men invest into their beauty and they do it discreetly. Men take Viagra because they can't perform naturally. Men go and get hair transplants because they start balding at 22. Like, men participate too. And I do think that there is pressure on men, but they shit on women far more than men are shit on. So I think that for women, do what you want because you're going to lose either way. People are not going to be happy either way. We constantly are under the microscope. We're constantly getting criticism. So if something makes you feel good in your skin and it's going to create a longer, happier life for you and the mental load is going to be lessened, by all means, do it. If it's going to cause more stress, don't do it. Like, just be very careful and use your discernment on doing things and why you're doing things. I love you all so much. I will see you next time.